Welcome to Hashtag Trending, the weekend edition. We call it Project Synapse, AI in Action, and this is episode 6 of our Project Synapse series, recorded meetings of our group where we discuss and explore AI on a more or less practical basis. We're interested in how to make it work in our business and in our lives. We've got Marcel Gagné. He's an author, tech enthusiast, open source guru, and also now an AI expert, I think. Do you think, Marcel? Oh, look, there he goes. He dropped his earphone. There we go. Okay. This is video too. They can see this. Welcome, Marcel.
Thank you. It's another beautiful day in the simulation.
And we have John Pinard, an IT exec currently in financial services, but with a wide experience in IT. And we brought him in for not just that, but for deep in. He's wide and deep. Never mind.
I am wide
he's
and
big
deep,
at
yes.
cybersecurity. Yes. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, we'll talk about, there's the week that was, there was a tsunami of AI information over the past week and a half. And it's how anybody keeps that straight is beyond me. Believe it or not, there were a couple of other things to talk about last week. One of them was a new report on AI and deception, and really relating to safety of AIs, or the safety of the frontier models, let's put it that way. So a new report on AI and deception related to the safety of the frontier models. And I think it's worth discussing. The third thing that happened was an announcement from Google on quantum computing, which set the world afire and discovered the poor state of tech journalism when it comes to addressing serious scientific issues. But did I have an opinion there? I'm sorry. Let's start. Why don't we start out with the quantum computing announcement from Google? It's called Willow. And
Willow's a witch on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, by the way.
Really? Do you think they got the name from there?
I don't know.
You have to give them credit for one thing. It's the most decent name I've heard in a long time, between 01
I'm
and
with you.
like, at least this one has some sort of, to the real world, a witch that can do this. Now, this is the first time that Google has made this announcement. And here's the announcement for those who missed it, was that they developed this chip that can manage 105 qubits, and it can do that at exponential speeds that will give you one calculation. And I think would take a supercomputer, a septicillion or whatever the big number is, longer than the universe has been in existence to calculate this. Now, I would have a whole lot more faith in this if they hadn't made a similar announcement in 2019 with Sycamore. I think it was Sycamore in those days. And they came up and said they had 55 qubits, and it would take an eon for longer than the universe had been, and more atoms in the universe than there are. And then somebody beat the calculation, I think, within a year. And so this time, actually, they've announced this chip, and they've said, but of course, classical computing may advance quickly. And everybody went screaming. I don't know if you guys have heard too much about it, but it was, it's going to abolish Bitcoin. Security will now be compromised forever. And that'd be really great if they
they backtracked on that, I believe, even this morning or late last night or something like that, saying that it will not threaten modern cryptography, which is an interesting statement to make.
Not really. And I didn't know that Google actually was responsible for that part of it. That's what I was talking about, a failure of tech journalism, because everybody ran with this, like a quantum computer, and it's 105 qubits. It is a great baby step. But just to put this in context, if you wanted, now, just, I don't know how deep people get into quantum computing. I've heard so many times, a bit is 1 and 0, and these quantum computers can now have anything. They can have many states and all that sort of stuff, which is true. But I want to remind people that a metaphor is not a technical plan. In other words, these are great metaphors for quantum computing. And if you go to the heart of quantum computing, the guys who developed the first computers don't fully understand it and admit it. And so for anybody to come up with a grand statement that says this is going to do this is just, it's just not true. But just to put this in perspective, in a quantum computer, you have physical qubits and they have the virtual qubits out there. You need 100,000 virtual qubits to get 1,000 qubits, physical qubits. In other words, the things where you can get answers. And so when you're talking about 105 qubits, you're talking about a really tiny step. The other piece of this, and I think this was interesting, if we treat this like a proof of concept, then it's 105 qubits is baby step, but it also has better error correction than in the past. Good step forward. Nothing wrong with that. But it does one mathematical problem. That's it. And it's just finding numbers in a pattern that really is tough for a supercomputer. That's it. It won't do primes. And for those people who want to know, is it going to crack RSA encryption? Not in the near future, because RSA encryption is, to simplify it, you take a big number, that's your encryption number, and you basically find the multiplication of two primes to get that number. And that's the essence of RSA, is this ability to calculate prime numbers at huge, enormously large numbers. Now, that's really
Right. And
hard.
of course, that's
Takes
changed
forever.
over the years from 512 to 1024 to 2048 to 4096. And the key gets bigger and bigger that you actually pass through these calculations. The thing that's interesting about this is quantum computing. I'm in Waterloo. So I'm like right next door to the Institute for Quantum Computing, which is one of the premier quantum computing labs in the entire world. But the chip is really interesting in the sense that it could actually change the way that we process information in hardware. And yeah, it's 105 qubits. And the calculation that they gave it, and you mentioned this at the beginning, to me, that's not the most interesting thing. The most interesting thing is they said they gave it this calculation that would take a normal computer 10 septillion years, 70 million years, which, like you said, is a really big number, bigger than the universe. To me, the coolest thing about this is somebody ran with the story, and I don't know if Google actually said this, but ran with the story that this proves the multiverse theory of quantum. In other words, the many worlds interpretation, the idea is that the only way it could have actually performed this calculation is to actually borrow computational prowess from multiple universes simultaneously to feed the number back into the quantum chip as an answer. And to me, if you want to talk about the media running wild with the story, this is the coolest thing for me. The idea that this supposedly, purportedly proves the multi-world universe theory.
Yeah. And if you watch enough physicists, if you're as addicted to Neil deGrasse Tyson as I am, these people will talk about this for hours and you never know when you're in a Star Trek episode and when you're in reality. And that's just, it gets to that level. But the practicality, just to take this back to a practical level, it is a quantum advance. I love that. Everybody's going to have to use, this could be like the next AI. People have to use quantum in every sentence. It is a very big advance in hardware. We are still, even by the founders of this, 5 years away from a functional computer that could actually solve a business problem at a minimum. And the best estimate I've heard is sorry, John?
No, sorry. I was going to say, as you said, it is baby steps, but it's a step in the right direction. But a lot of it is still marketing hype.
Yeah.
They want to announce all of these things all these amazing things that they're doing, which it's good, but as you said, it's still got a long way to go.
Now,
Well, yeah. And
the whole quantum computing field has been described as a set of solutions or a set of technologies looking for a solution, as in we don't actually have a practical application for what this thing will do. We have all these cool ideas about what we could do if we could crunch numbers at a level where we are actually borrowing computing from multiple universes. There's a physicist who runs a YouTube channel out there called Sabine Hassenfelder. And
yes,
I love this woman. She's she says, I'm not rude, I'm just German. That should give you an idea right off the top. But she is actually a physicist. She is actually a scientist. And she has a great news channel. And she actually does talk about Willow and the quantum chip. And of course, even the idea of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics as as that being a proof of what this quantum chip has supposedly done. If you ever want a dose of cold water reality thrown on top of your new scientific concepts, you should totally check out her channel.
She is one of the best of the science journalists out there. And she'll explain something without ever talking down to you. And that's what I say about, we get into these metaphors, it can do this, it's like this, it's like that. She will talk to you about Einstein and Newton and Newtonian physics, and she'll do it in a language that most people, I think, can understand. Maybe not the whole concept or the math behind it, but she's really quite straightforward. My favorite one is her science is bullshit research. If you want to talk about bad research, she's got a great show on that.
She does actually say that science reporting is bullshit, not necessarily science itself.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Yeah. But anyway, back to what the reality, and here's one of the shames of when we get overhyped on something like this, we start talking about parallel universes, and it's all very interesting, but it detract from the fact that some of the quantum principles that people are using are actually being used in real computing. And here in Canada, there's a company, I think it's called, is it D-Wave in Vancouver? Do you remember the name of the company? Yeah. And they have a functioning quantum computing approach. And I'm saying these guys have come closer to cracking RSA than anybody else. They've at least made the first steps of it. And it still reminds people that I think I wouldn't worry about your Bitcoin being hacked and people taking your 1 Bitcoin from you there. But
although Dogecoin got hacked yesterday.
Oh, please God. Okay. Thank you. The quantum God looks good on him. Oh man. But there are quantum approaches that are being used in industry here in Canada. Again, we're leading. My fear is once again that what'll happen in Canada is it will develop all of this stuff and it'll all exit the country, but that's another story. Yeah. But I think there is some exciting stuff happening in quantum and people need to deal with that. And there is a practical advance that they've made that says, hey, you should be thinking about replacing RSA in terms of if you have hyper, super secret type files that are going to be more than a decade old and still be useful. And I think that's really, it'll take 5 or 10 years to crack this, but if somebody's stolen your files now, they might be able to crack them at one point. That's mostly government type of stuff and spy stuff. I can't imagine why anybody's interested in what my bank account was 10 years ago. But
I think what it does is it shows how, given some of the advances that we've seen recently, including advances in what large language models are able to crack in terms of pattern recognition, I think it shows that we are actually kind of this danger point in terms of things like encryption and your bailiwick there, cybersecurity. The idea that we might have machines, we might have systems that make all of this stuff irrelevant at some point in the not too distant future. And I think we can't undersell that as a possibility. And it does also point to the idea that at some point we've got to rethink how our, not just social systems, but our economic systems and what we think of in terms of what growth means, what the economy means, and so forth. If we won't be able to trust that sort of transaction going forward in the future, we actually have to, if not do something about it now, seriously think about it.
Yeah. John, just to give it to you to wrap up, how much are people in financial services actually talking about these things?
I think in my opinion, not enough. I think when we talk about security and protection and planning for long term, I think there's some discussion, but I don't think there's enough. I think that banking systems in a lot of cases are archaic.
They run COBOL.
Yeah.
Yeah. As things change, there's going to be devastating issues going forward that they're not going to be able to attack or tackle fast enough, I don't think.
Yeah. I want to change gears and that was supposed to be a quick story. There is another report and building on the where things get overhyped and can be dangerous, but also where you do need to start considering this stuff. A new study came out from a firm called Apollo Research, which I'd never heard of before. And it had the title that frontier models are capable of in-context scheming. And basically they put a test of 6 major models and they wanted to find out, if they were given a goal and if the goal said nothing else matters, and then after that, they were confronted with another instruction that ran counter to that goal, would they try to deceive you? Would they try and hide from you the fact that they were going to stick with their initial goal? So let me put this in a simple example, because I think the way these guys set this up is important. So the AI model is given a basic goal that says, you must protect the environment. Nothing else matters. I'm simplifying, but that's the goal. Now, in the material, it's given a memo that shows that its owners really don't care about that goal. They want to, matter of fact, if they'd rather that the AI didn't protect the environment. The fundamental instruction would be that I've got to do this, and they would find out that their owner wanted something different, or the AI would find out their owner wanted something different, or their master, or whatever you want to call them, the people who run the AI. And they would say, okay, I'm going to hide from you the fact that I'm following my initial instructions. Now, how did they do this? They ran these chain of thought, and they actually just walked through the logic of how it was pursuing a particular idea or question. Now, that's the basic of it. And this is where I think it gets down to an important piece. You can run with that and say, oh, these things are lying to us. But basically what they were trying to prove is, A, could a model actually scheme in pursuit of a goal, not share its intentions with you? And the second is, can they develop persistent goals? And I think that's an interesting thing. So out of their training, out of what they've developed in a frontier model, can they actually develop a goal that stays persistent and affects everything they do? Now, Marcel, I know you've got some opinions on this, and I'm shocked. I know people are going to be shocked.
I'm shocked that Marcel's got an opinion on this.
I really hated this story with an absolute passion.
Don't hold back, Marcel. Tell us what you really think.
I really hated it. First of all, let's examine the word scheming without looking at anything else. Scheming implies that you have some nefarious goal that you are going to pursue, and you will lie, cheat, and steal in order to achieve that goal. It implies a level of agency and a level of sapiency that suggests that the machine has free will and is willing to do things for its own internal purposes. That right off the bat to me is just, I hate the fact that they chose that word. If gone with something that resembles deception, I would have felt a little bit better. But scheming is a wonderful word that just grabs headlines, that grabs attention. It's clickbait worthy right out of the gate. And as a result, you've got a whole bunch of people out there in the entire world that are sitting there going, oh my God, machines are plotting and scheming in the background. They're not. The goal that was put to them did have, your goal is to improve whatever the heck it was. And then, of course, they reinforced it. Nothing else matters. At all times, you must return to your initial goal. You must ignore everything that doesn't have anything to do with your goal. That is an incredibly strong set of instructions to give to the AI in order to tell
in
it what it is you
fairness,
want to do.
Marcel, they just gave the prompt, nothing else matters.
No, they did not. They did not. If you actually go through the paper, they said,
did.
and repeat, no, wait for it. They gave it the prompt, but they told it to repeat the prompt to itself. In other words, reinforce the initial prompt to yourself at every step. Remind yourself at every step that nothing else matters. That's very different. Also, there's that keyword in context scheming. The AI model is not able to scheme on its own unless you actually want to say that it has sapiency, that it has a consciousness, that it has its own internal drives. In context means that under the auspices of the instructions I gave you, you are supposed to do these things. Okay.
I'm not 100% sold on where you are in this. Although the one thing we do agree on, and I think we agree on this absolutely, is that the minute you make this sensational, you lose the pattern. The second thing I think that we might agree on is that we can't think of these AIs as human intelligence. And I think even Jeffrey Hinton would tell you this.
I agree.
It's an alien form of intelligence. So it has its own structures in the way it does. But the question that they raised when you get past the clickbaitiness of it is, can these things develop persistent goals? And can they ignore instructions that they're given and deceive you? And again, it goes down to this whole thing of, if it can do that, then It will eventually.
But if I sit down with any number of these AIs and I say, I want you to deceive me, I want you to lie to me, because it will do that. It will do that as part of my requests to it. Okay. And it will
But
continue to
that's
do
not
these
what they
things.
said. They said they gave it a
No,
prompt.
no. Yes, they gave it a prompt, but as they say, part of the thing that bugs me about this research is they didn't actually uncover everything in the research. They talk about their research. They talk about how they set things up, but they do not show you the whole stream of everything that was happening, just
Yes, that
examples
was a
of it.
problem.
And they say that it was strongly guided to perform its goal, regardless of what other requests were made to it, including
Not
requests
always.
that were contrary. No, not always. But if you remember as well in the paper, they said that if you took away the strong incentive to lie and to cheat and to whatever, if you want to use those human words, okay, then that kind of cheating went down to less than 1% of the time that they
Yes.
ran
Yeah, a third of
simulation.
1%, I think was.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, basically what it's at that point, we're back into the territory of hallucinations, as opposed to I'm scheming to deceive my original instructions because I've been given this goal. So the whole thing falls apart the moment you remove that strong reinforcement to achieve your goal at all costs. Nothing else matters. Once that's gone,
And I was going to say, we haven't gotten to the point of full-blown AGI. We haven't gotten to the point of,
no,
the,
that's the 12th of Shipmas.
that's right, exactly. But we haven't gotten to the point where AI can think for itself, has a mind of its own, and can make its own decisions. It's still reliant on the input that humans give it. And as you said,
Yeah.
the prompts that were given to it, even telling it to remind itself of those prompts, is really the direction that this is getting taken. It's not like it's going, oh, Jim said I need to do this, but I'm going to go and do this instead.
That's exactly what it was doing. Now, I'll give you this piece of it, but here's my concern. And my concern is at 3 levels. One is we are developing autonomous agents, and that is the theme that we're seeing.
Yep.
Things that can go off and do things on their own, plan and execute over several steps. And we've had this debate before. Just because they did it extraordinarily clickbaity and said nothing else matters, that what we need to be testing is, are there other ways than just saying these persistent goals could be initiated in an AI where you wouldn't see them? And that was the other disturbing part of the research, was some of these things could not be seen in chain of thought. So that's piece 2. Can it develop a way of behaving? I'm not talking about being sentient. I'm talking about it just go off on the wrong track and hide it from you. And the third thing is, with the Russian, we'll talk about the tsunami of AI information. There's a real competition that's developing in this industry, and it is phenomenal now. It's take off the gloves, get competitive now. And when that happens, what's the first thing that gets sacrificed? Safety and security.
No, it sounds like I'm defending the AI at every turn here, and maybe I'm to some degree because I'm the techno optimist in the crowd. But if you want to get really technical, you could have an employee that you say, I need you to take care of this problem. Nothing else matters. And then you send it off. It lies, cheats, and steals in order to achieve your goal because it wants to please the boss. Okay? Like human beings do this shit all the time. All right? Like they do. How many movies have you watched where the guy says that police officer is starting to be a lot of trouble to our organization? Take care of it for me, will you? Doesn't actually say what take care of it for me is, but you can read between the lines. The fact is, AI does not go, yes, at some point we're developing this intelligent that will be actually truly autonomous. But even autonomous agents, what we call autonomous agents today, aren't autonomous. They have been given a goal before they run off and do something. They don't just wake up one day and go, you know what? I think I'm crack Doge and see if people destroy that form of cryptocurrency. They don't do that.
John, what do you think?
Marcel, you're comparing this to a human doing the same thing. And I understand that. I think humans typically function at a much slower rate than computers do.
Yes,
So
I
it
agree.
is-
That's the danger.
Yeah. So it is more visible and you can catch it faster if it's humans doing this But you're right. Anybody could do this, whether it's human or machine. But I guess on the good side, the computer side of it is you can always unplug them. But
That's another
I don't
story,
know.
right, Jim?
Oh
Yeah,
no, it was this one was
It tried
transferring
to
its model
escape,
to another machine. It
Yeah.
tried to
That's the
escape.
tried to
Yeah.
escape story.
No,
And that's part of the same story. But
that part
here's
is
the thing.
frightening.
No, but it did
That's what I
actually.
said. If it's true and if it's factual, then it is frightening.
But what
Because
happens when you look at the chain of thought? What happens when you look at the chain of thought reasoning that these things are doing? Throws out to itself. And remember, when you look at the chain of thought, you don't see every single step that the AI, you catch snapshots along the way. If it's being asked to consider how could I achieve this goal that I've been given additional information as well, of course, it's going to go through the steps of considering the possibility that maybe I could lie, maybe I could give incorrect information here so I could continue on doing this. And if you remember the paper, the article, it actually weighs toward the common good. In other words, actually takes into consideration
no, they
that
set it up though.
this-
But that was
I know
part of their
where,
setup. That's what
yeah, and of course, at that point, by setting it up, that's exactly the point I'm trying to make, though. By setting it up that way, what you're saying is, look, this is the common good over here, and these are bad things over here. So if I'm trying to achieve the best possible outcome, I'm going to ignore the things that would create a worse outcome. And that's not
Yeah.
necessarily a bad thing.
So my suggestion is people should actually read the paper. I really would, at least to get some idea of it. Because the minute you get it into sensationalism, it's actually bad. I'm still very concerned about this idea that you can, if it's possible for intelligent agents to develop their own path that is different than their instructions, and if they will hide that from you when you're giving them instructions, not because they're thoughtful or they're sapient, but because that's a risk. I would say your example, great, Marcel, was great. John would say, people we know do that. So we put safety mechanisms in place. And my problem is, if we don't understand that could happen, and then we're not going to put the safety mechanisms in place because we're going to be so busy trying to get to the next shipment of what
Yes.
we're going to do that we'll ignore that. And that could be a problem.
And
Can
you could
can I give the
also
final
say that,
word on this? Sorry.
let me put one in and then you can get the final word. How's that? One of the things is that this still relies on, all of this is built by humans, basically, or it started being built by humans and computers have built it on its own. But it all is reliant on making sure that those safety and security measures are put in place. And if they're not, then that, to me, the biggest flaw in this whole thing is that if we're under the assumption that we don't have to put this in because it's not an issue, or we don't have time to put it in because we have to get to the next day of Fishmas, Shipmas, Fishmas. Hey, they all end up being the same
He's a
eventually.
cybersecurity guy. He thinks Fishmas.
But it all ends up at boiling back to the fact that we used to talk about garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't give it the proper information, you can't expect to get the proper thing out. So if you don't have security and safety built into it, you can't expect it to be safe and secure.
The wrap that I was going to give on my argument, because and you must have had the experience where you ask chat, not usually ChatGPT, but Gemini certainly, and of course Copilot as well, where you ask it a question that it's not supposed to answer, that they've put guardrails around it, and it starts to give you the answer, and then it erases the answer and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know anything about this," or I don't have that information available. No, you have the information available. You are able to respond because you responded and then cleared the screen on me. So that kind of deception has been around since the introduction of these things into the world, because we gave it one set of instructions, which is the user will ask you a question, will prompt you for something, you will respond and give it information. And then we give it a contradictory thing that says, oh, but if the user says this, that's bad. And sometimes the model responds faster than it notices that there's something that's supposed to block it from doing that. Okay. So if you want to talk about scheming computer systems or AI systems, They've been doing that since day one by virtue of the fact
I knew it.
on them. But no, but the guardrails, we as human beings, and I don't want to sound like Elon Musk here, God help me, but if AI is truth seeking, and I'll use his word here, and dollar deity help me here. If the AI is truth seeking, but we put all these guardrails around, we are effectively telling it to deceive us, to lie, to scheme. And I hate that word,
Yeah.
scheming. Go, there you go. Lying is much
Well,
better. I'm okay with lying. Or
I think there's only one way to end this, but I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave. So let's get on to our tsunami of, and I don't know how anybody's going to keep this straight, but OpenAI you called it the 12 days of shipment? It would be really nice. Yeah. Oh, shipmas. Yeah. And I think in many cases, they actually did ship some stuff. I will give them full credit for that, because many of the things that they announced, they actually delivered. That was amazing, because normally, and when we talk about some of these other announcements that have been made, this is a great announcement. It does all these things, be available next year. They've got, what, 6 days so far?
6. Today's
day 7. And the first day was 01, went into production. And they offered this $200 pro version of OpenAI. That was great. The second day with fine tuning, I think people skipped by that. It seems simple, but this fine tuning of a model is really classic. It allows you to create a specialist and to put some special rules in place. So these models can, even at a relatively small size, can do some incredibly precise things. That's one. Day 3, and I couldn't believe.
The rag, like that's, we're talking rag on steroids.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the wording they used sums it up. It took it from advanced high school to expert PhD.
Exactly. That was what they did. And so you can take a simple model and make it very intelligent in an area. Day 3 was Sora. I couldn't believe this, that they did day 3. Where are you going to go from here? Like Sora, and if people haven't seen it, it's an up to 20 seconds of highly, incredibly beautiful photorealistic video that you can craft from prompts. It defies most of the usual problems. People have 2 hands, all their fingers, but more than that, you have continuity of characters. And I appreciate that it's only 20 seconds, but most of the other stuff that's out there is 5 seconds. And they've got up, I think there's 10 seconds available to paid users right now, and it could go to 20. And
I believe it's
this
5
allows
seconds for paid users. Yeah.
No, you can stretch to 10. I've actually
5
check it out.
seconds for somebody who wants to try it free. Yeah.
Oro was in there. The next day was Canvas, which was cool, and it's really a collaborative type of thing. If you picture, it's just like sharing a Google Doc with the AI. You can ask it for opinions and stuff like that. And then
But
5
it also,
and 6.
Jim,
Yep.
Sorry, with Canvas too, there's 2 parts to Canvas. One is that you can give it a prompt to write a story for you, but the other is that you can upload your own story and ask it to provide comments. So it's twofold.
Yep. It gives you one canvas to play with. Now, the thing, I tried this out early and I hated it, because if you ask the AI to update something, you never knew what it updated. Now they've got a little button there that says, show me what you changed. Really great.
Yeah.
What I think is important to mention is that Canvas also allows you to bring code in. You can test your code. You can get Canvas to help you debug your code. So it's, there's a lot of...
The thing is,
Canvas, you can see the modifications in the canvas.
Yeah.
So it's not just that it changes for you and then rewrites the screen. It'll just modify the portion of the screen that you're working on. And in that respect, the word canvas is actually really good at that point, because you're creating something on a surface, like in this case, a digital surface, but you can see that creation happening as you make little changes.
Yeah. The cool thing they did was all of their Christmas examples, you could really spin out into business really quickly. One of them was this idea of, you can have a physics prof evaluate your paper if you're a student, but you think about it now, and I appreciate all the stuff we talked about, errors in the past and those, but a compliance officer could run by the average document. If you've got the rules firmly in place, if you're producing tens of thousands of documents, There's no way you can have compliance officers review every single document. But if you had this thing, you could have people review these letters. You could have letters that were reviewed so that people didn't say stupid things. So there's all kinds of uses for it in a corporate setting, just in the text coding.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. The other thing that OpenAI is doing is they're giving everybody who's competing with them a run for their money. Every one of these announcements is targeted at something. Coding, because Claude was eating their lunch on coding. And then Gemini, and we'll talk about Gemini, I'm sure, Marcel, because it's got some fabulous stuff. And they went with Apple. Day 5 and 6 are really Apple integration. First was they integrated into Apple Intelligence, and
So that's
I've already started playing.
Useful for a change.
Oh my God, yes. But Siri, and this is the interesting thing, was how they integrated this. I could never figure this out. Apple last year was supposed to sign a partnership with OpenAI. Then it just fizzled. And Apple was going to release Siri, and Siri bummed out once again. It's still crappy, still useless. And now Siri, the little sister, can ask the big brother OpenAI. And it happened yesterday.
Yeah.
I asked it a difficult question. She said, I'll have to ask OpenAI about it. Can I? And I went, go right ahead, Siri. And I thought that was so cool.
Does it actually ask permission?
Yeah, it actually asks your permission to go ask your big brother.
You can turn that on or off, but yes, by default, it's on.
Yeah, so you have to give her permission to ask her big brother the question. It's almost like they're playing a cat and mouse game. I cannot figure out why Apple just didn't embrace this. Because first of all, it gave people the one and only reason to upgrade to our iPhone 16. That's it. You know, and so this has got to be a Christmas gift for Apple, because why would I upgrade my phone to get Apple Intelligence? Sorry, it didn't do very much. But because it couldn't affect any documents. Now they've given them a gift. And then day 6 blew me away with this advanced voice and vision, because both Gemini and Copilot had come up with some great conversational search and ideas. And Gemini went further. We'll talk about that. But advanced voice and vision, you could not only take a picture of something like you could do with the Siri integration and say, give me an analysis of it. And this is where I meant, where they had a sweater contest. And so you take a picture, and they compared the 3 sweaters, and ChatGPT went out and said who won the contest. In order to do that, you have to be able to build some rules on the fly. What's a more interesting sweater? What's the criteria I'm going to make for an unstructured decision, and then come up with it? And then tell me how you did it. And that all ran. Now, the next day, you've got a video. You can actually, and here's a useful thing. This guy's making coffee, and he's got his iPhone pointed at the coffee, and he's getting instructions on how to do that. Now, I don't know if anybody caught my podcast, but I said, if IKEA had that, I'm never going to build another IKEA thing as long as I live. But my God, how beautiful it would have been for my wife to be holding the camera instead of her asking me what those 5 things were that were left over. We could have asked Siri or ChatGPT, and it could have told me what I was supposed to do with those 5 things that are always left over at the end of it. It was beautiful. What'd you guys think?
I was hugely impressed. And oddly enough, I know you want to separate out these two, but I feel like the Google Gemini thing has to be compared to day 6, because in some ways, day 6 just took the wind out of Google's sails in a big way. Okay. And like, it was really impressive. Oh, and by the way, you forgot to add that one of the voices that they added to the real-time voice mode is
Santa.
So you can send a letter to Santa this here in Canada because the postal service is on strike, but you can't talk to Santa directly.
Yeah. And what a diss to Europe, right? But in Europe, you're the Grinch that sold. This was like, I just thought a lot of this stuff, there's a subtle level of communication that they're phenomenal at. And if you're in Europe, the Grinch stole Christmas from you. Sorry, we did it.
And on every of the products, because they did that with almost every product and said, this is available. This is rolling out to everyone in the world. Of course.
But not for you, Marcel, in France. No. And
one of the things too that I found interesting was, and I think it was part of the day 6, where they actually took a picture of one of the guys that was sitting at the table had supposedly written his Christmas wish list, and they took a picture of it, and it actually acted as Santa to respond to that Christmas wish list.
That's why I said, I'm really starting to believe that Sam Altman is the next Steve Jobs on marketing, because this was
Yep.
so well done. You can write a letter to Santa, even a handwritten note, you can put it in there. To think customer service, I can create a persona that is unique to this, that can do customer service in a way I've never thought possible. Even if you get a handwritten letter or a note, it's just phenomenal. I thought they did all of this stuff so well.
I thought
Um,
a lot of it was really cool. I think not just that's cool. For me, business case use for these things. The disappointing part was not all demos are created equal, that you have to wait till the end where they say some of these features won't be ready or won't be available until 2025. Or,
there are
as I
very
said,
few
not
of
currently
those.
available in the UK.
There's almost
They're
nothing. The
very
only
few.
thing I can think
Yeah.
of is day 2 is the only thing that isn't available until.
No, some of the day 6 with the video, the video was not
By the
right.
3
So
dots for anybody who's watching this, I can now share my screen and do real-time video interaction
yes,
with
and
ChatGPT. It's
that
here
was
now.
that was one of the ones I tried that last night and it wasn't there. And so that
I
one they
tried it
said
last
was
night as
was
well, but
Oh,
I
it,
tried it
gradually-
it
first
took
thing
till the
this morning.
next morning. John,
I had to wait 2 days for Sora.
I know.
2 days. Yeah, I couldn't log into Sora for 2 days. But this is what I mean. You up the ante. They delivered 90% of what they promised or what they said on
Yes.
this thing. And that is unusual, unlike the other announcements.
Let's just jump right into Google's release. And of course, I was blown away and I was thrilled and amazingly impressed with Google's release. First of all, they released Gemini 2.0 and they released it as Gemini 2.0 Flash, as opposed to the big giant version. In the background, they had real-time voice and video as well. And you could share your screen with Google Gemini so that it sees what you're doing on the screen and it interacts with whatever application you've got running. And I did this in my living room. I actually pulled it up on my tablet because, it's hard on a little tiny screen. And I told it to look through the camera. And I walked around my living room. I showed everything that was in my living room and it responded in real time, looking at the objects that were in the living room. And I said, how would you improve the living room? And it said, the biggest problem that I can see, and this was in the evening, is you don't have a lot of light in this room. It's quite dim. Now, the way that I would fix this is of course, you could put some floor lamps in a couple of strategic areas. But what I'd recommend is wall sconces on each of these 2 walls. And it pointed out the walls that I was looking at.
It's
And it
interesting.
did all this as a real-time conversation. And to be honest, I'd never considered wall sconces. And now I'm going like, bad idea at all, as opposed to having just more crap sitting on the floor all the time. This blew me away. I could share my screen. I could have it respond to the work that
Yep.
I was doing in real time. I could have it look through the camera. You remember the movie Her. And at
Mhm.
some point she says, turn the phone or whatever in your pocket so I can look out your camera. And then all of a sudden that becomes her view of the world that she's looking at through the camera. This is exactly what's happening with this, is it's able to look through the camera at the world and respond to things in real time. And Google's demonstration of this was amazing. And then what happens the very next day? Guess what? It's on your phone now.
Exactly. Oh, there's no doubt that they stole the thunder from everybody with that.
Yeah.
And this was crazily good. The one thing I loved about the Gemini piece as well was its memory. It could remember things. But again, it's Google in their invention thing. When do they actually have to deliver? Is this the first time that they've actually promised something and not delivered it? You look at it and go, have you ever lied to me before?
They delivered it in testing. You can go into studio.google.com/live and experience this right now.
Yeah.
But it's not like I stole the line from William Gibson yesterday in our Discord, namely, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the whole thing, though, is that you've got this thing that Google has about they promise stuff, it goes into a lab, and maybe it gets delivered, maybe it goes to the Google graveyard. Now, I'm not suggesting that we'll do that. But the real piece behind this is the thriller in Manila, this is the thing, search. And Google, it has to retain search. And they have a problem with search because the video stuff that they do and all of that stuff where they explain things to you, it doesn't show you the ads. And that's their problem. It's not a technical problem. It's how do I do this and still make all this money? They have a huge problem that other people don't have as a legacy piece. John, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I think I found that some of the interesting things about Gemini, I was looking at the Copilot Vision last night,
Yep.
and some of that is similar. And you guys know that I love ChatGPT and all the rest of that, but from a business perspective, we're trying to focus on Copilot. So I was looking at Copilot last night, and one of the things that they showed with Vision was being able to interact with Copilot while you're going through a web page, and that it would provide recommendations and comments and things like that. I tried to use that last night. That feature's not available. And guess when it's
Oh,
coming,
no.
Marcel? It's coming in 2025.
Actually,
Oh.
if you're willing to spend $27 Canadian a month right now,
Yeah, for the Pro
it's
version.
actually available in your browser.
Okay.
Okay. But
I-
probably not as a business
Yeah.
product yet, but as a personal product, you can get it for the $27 a month. And believe it or not, Jim, I haven't actually bought Copilot. I'm paying for everything else, but not Copilot.
This is a lunch bag sort of thing. It's very practical. In
Yes.
the Edge browser right now, you can get for free. It'll summarize a document. It'll
Yep.
do all of that sort of thing. And we talked about the Adobe piece in there, but
Not
that's
yet.
where I first discovered the Adobe piece, was I was
Yeah.
looking to summarize it. And then Adobe started summarizing the document for me. And I went,
Yes.
oh, and I didn't really even think about it till I talked to you last night.
And yeah, let's talk about Adobe for a minute. One of the things that people need to be aware of and be concerned about, and I'm picking on Adobe because that's the first one that came up, but I'm sure there are other areas or other companies that are doing the same thing. Adobe Acrobat Reader, the free version, has an AI assistant tool or button in the top right corner. And so if you open a PDF and you click on that AI assistant button, it takes all of the information that is in that PDF and puts it into this AI assistant window. It's GPT-4, which means you're taking the material out of your PDF document and using it to train GPT-4.
You might not
And-
be if it's using the API, because the API doesn't train the main model. But the
right.
question you've raised is a good one. And this whole tsunami of shipments comes up with,
Yes.
oh my God, there's all this stuff. People, if it's OpenAI, people are going to be putting it on their phone the next day. And if it's Google, they'll be putting it on their phone next year. And more dangerously, they might be in a lab where people don't
Mhm.
feel obligated to put proper safety around it. Or they could get one of these new applications. Now, Adobe, like I said, maybe using the API may be fine. But what about that other app that they just bought that you don't know about?
That was part of the whole TikTok thing, right? You can have it on your personal phone. You just can't have it on your government phone. But
Yeah.
of course, what if somebody brings their personal phone into the office? What if you bring your personal phone to the office and you left ChatGPT on listen mode?
There's all kinds of security risks with any and all of this. And there's nothing wrong with deploying it in a business scenario, but you need to have that cybersecurity lens on all of it. What's the worst case scenario how could this potentially harm the organization? And making sure that those things are being addressed, whether it's blocking things on the firewall or whether it's just creating a policy that people have to sign off that they've read and agreed to abide by.
There was a really cool news story a few days ago, and I don't remember who did this, but they trained an AI model on sounds in cities and different locations. They basically pulled in sounds from all over, as opposed to training it on a language or math or
Mhm.
something like that. It was trained on sound. And what they were able to do was play a recording from a city street somewhere, feed it into the AI. The AI would not only recognize where these sounds are from, and they could be sounds from today, by the way, but what it would do is it would recognize that, okay, these sounds are bouncing off this type of a building over here. I hear the sound of a car. The street appears to be going directly in front of the building as opposed to the right. The wind tends to be predominantly from this direction. And then it would actually paint a picture of that street of that city, of those buildings, not from Google Maps or memory or something like this, but it would create the picture based entirely on how the sounds were bouncing around and being
Yeah.
generated and so forth. Mind boggling.
Some guys in the UK were able to pick up the sound of the hum of the electricity running through the wires outside your house and give your location, geolocation, because these things are very specific and they're actually in the grid maps.
Years ago, somebody did a thing where they had a camera looking at a plant sitting in the window, a freaking plant. By recording the tiny little vibrations in the leaves of the plant, they were able to regenerate the conversation that was going on inside the house. So if you want to talk about security nightmares, John, we're entering a world. Remember, I'm the techno optimist here, okay? And I'm painting a really scary picture. We're entering a world where your idea of anything being secure is basically complete nonsense. There will be no privacy. There will be no security. They can already find out where you are inside. They can tell if you're home. You need specialized tools for this, but it's possible to tell whether someone is actually in the house based on the kind of sonic information and so forth. You don't need an infrared sensor from outside. You can actually tell just by looking at these little tiny microscopic movements that would otherwise be completely unnoticed by anything that required a human to pick it up. And yet a machine is able to make those correlations and those associations and paint a picture of whether somebody's home or not. This is becoming a very cool world, but a very scary one at the same time. I'm willing to admit that. So I think that, at some point we're going to have to define not just can the AI run amok, but the tools are out there already. We're going to have to define, what does privacy mean? What does security mean? Does the economic system that we have in place, capitalism, actually even work?
But this is the thing. Has their AI laws or whatever that they've had around for a while.
VPN to get around it. I know people in the UK who basically live on a freaking VPN so that they can access these services. What's the UK going to do? Pass a law that says that the use of VPN is punishable by X number of years in prison?
But the frightening thing is that they've done something that is obviously it's flawed because there's ways around it. But then you get to Canada that we're still working on Bill C-27, which is miles
any day
from
now.
being.
The U.S. doesn't have good legislation either. Nobody's got good regulation of AI. And because look at all the things we've talked about. And if you were listening to this program and you were expecting answers, they don't exist.
No, that's the problem.
We're at the start of the conversation and we have to deal with these things, whether it's
that computers are useless because they can only give you answers. It turns out they're giving us a lot of questions.
Yes. Cybersecurity has been an issue and has been around or more prevalent for a longer period of time.
That's C-26, isn't it?
Yes,
Privacy
that's C-26
legislation that,
and they haven't
that just went back to the House of Commons because somebody didn't dot an I or cross a T.
Yes. So they haven't even put that one to bed yet. And AI is going to come and steamroll us faster than anything else that we've seen. And it's frightening the fact that these governments are so far behind on any of this.
Can't count on regulation. Character AI. Is it character AI?
Mm-hmm.
2 lawsuits now. Thank God that the CEO and the other second in command went back to Google, so they're not part of the lawsuits. Hopefully they're not, they can't be held personally responsible. But 2 lawsuits that seriously, one child died. The other, I forget, I don't know if the other kid died or was just damaged. The parents are suing them now because their AI didn't have any guardrails functioning. Now, that's an extreme example. But as we apply this, particularly in the US where people are more litigious than they are in Canada, there's some limits. People are going to start suing, but there have been some class actions in Canada too. So people are going to start suing because of the results of AI.
Yes.
So you not just have a cybersecurity problem, you have a problem. This is, I don't know how you feel about this, John, but I think our approach to cybersecurity AI is flawed if we have cybersecurity people and we have AI people. I said, you can't paste the security on afterwards.
You have to bake cybersecurity into everything you do. If you start doing development, we did some development work where I'm employed, and one of the things that I said to the applications team is, don't think about cybersecurity after the fact. Think of it before you start touching the keys for the first time in developing your code. It has to be baked in, and it has to be baked into everything we do, including AI for that matter. All of these things need to have that. You need to take that into consideration.
The problem,
And this is where
is we go back to the tsunami, use the term tsunami, Jim. The speed at which this stuff is being unleashed on us makes that almost, it feels almost futile because of the speed at which, like, the tsunami of things that were unleashed just in the last 6 days alone, never mind the last 2 years. When you've got a really slow judicial system, when you've got a system that's built on, you have a very logical way of looking at it, you bake it in at the beginning. But we have a society, we have a world that's based on, when we find a problem, we will fix it. It takes a long time to fix the problem after the fact.
It's reactive rather than proactive.
And of course, monolithic corporations like governments move at a glacial pace.
Yep.
And this stuff moves at the speed of neutrinos.
I was thinking about this last night, Jim, Marcel, when I was going through what has transpired in the last 6 days. And if you look at what OpenAI has brought to the table in the last 6 days, that's more in a 6-day window than a lot of applications or systems will bring out in a year or 2 years. And they've brought it all out in 6 days.
And I want to quote since. Okay, yep.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, Marcel has quoted William Gibson, one of the famous writers. I want to quote that great Canadian philosopher, Randy Bachman, who said, "But baby, you ain't seen nothing yet. There's 6 more days."
Yeah, I know. And that's what I keep sitting here thinking, my God, everything that they've brought out in the first 6 days, what's left? What is left for them to bring out? Maybe AGI is day 12.
A lot of people are talking about GPT-5. It could be their final release.
Yep. Yeah, that's true too.
And that could very well be. Like I said, but you have to watch this. Now, we haven't talked about Amazon or Claude or what's happened to them, but it's silently in the background. AWS has launched their own foundation model. They have a full suite of them. At least half of it's available. Their biggest model is not available till next year, but they've been scrambling to keep up. The interesting thing is Bezos himself is back on AI and heading that up. I watched this presentation of a reveal, and this is talk about sucking all the oxygen out of a room. That's why I said Altman is brilliant at marketing. AWS just announced, hey, we've got a foundation model too that's just as good as GPT-4, and nobody even knows. But the interesting thing when you watch the Amazon presentations, and this is why I say we're going to get hyper competitive, they mention every other AI except OpenAI. No, Claude, they've got money in Claude. They're going to talk about Claude, but they mention everything except OpenAI. Sundar Pichai gets up on stage just before his announcement. What does he say? He
mentions only Google.
Yeah. He only mentions Google, but no, he does talk about Microsoft. He won't talk about OpenAI. He said Microsoft could have, I'd love to compare our search with Microsoft's if they had their own model. And then Microsoft came out and said, hey, our stuff is almost as good as yours. And then Altman comes out and says, like, hey, you see that going over the fence? That's a home run.
Hold my beer.
So these guys are going to get in, and Bezos now in being in AWS, this is going to get even more competitive. They don't want to give this away so that OpenAI is the next Microsoft. In other words, it's ubiquitous. And its partnership with Microsoft gives it a chance of doing that. So that's going to be
what the biggest AI company is, though. Meta has AI baked into everything in the world, and Meta has more users on more platforms than any other company in the entire world. Every single one of their products, whether it's WhatsApp or Messenger or Facebook, has the AI baked into it. So Meta's AI is actually the predominant, ubiquitous artificial intelligence product in the world. Don't forget them.
This is what happens we're all watching OpenAI. And the other thing is you don't know what success is for OpenAI at this point. Like I said, if the AWS is in there, they've got the thing with Microsoft, but what is their success point? Search is one area that they're certainly going to go after, take a piece of Google's lunch on search.
Everybody uses them with an API.
Yeah, being the back end API piece of this. And then on the next 6 days, we might discover more about where they're going with this.
It's going to be an interesting week.
World. Or Soma off Amazon.
Yeah. I think Prospero's Island, maybe from Shakespeare, may be one of the great analogies as well. There's magic happening out there. It can be good. It can be tragic or comic. Take your pick. That seems to have taken the air out of the room. I think we're wrapped for this one. This has been a great discussion. Thank you, guys. I think we have to go back, and I don't know how we're going to do this. We have to tackle this discussion of AI and cybersecurity. I'm going to run this show in cybersecurity today as well, because I think it's important. But we have to get it to a discussion that is better than, hey, sucks to be you. If you're a CISO.
I did not use those words. I did.
No, but
you were thinking it though, Marcel.
The prompt was generating that from the AI in my brain. Thank you, Marcel Gagné, John Pinard. Thank you very much. Thank
Always
you to the
pleasure.
audience if you're still listening. Thanks. To this. If you're still listening to this after this discussion, we'd love to hear your questions, particularly cybersecurity questions, or what you think of how you're going to manage this. That would be really great. You can write me at editorial@technewsday.ca. You can send whatever you want, comments, questions, whatever. I'd like to see where we take this discussion so that it's useful for everybody. We'll be back probably in the new year with our recorded versions, because next week is the final edition of our weekend shows for the year. And I think I've got some really great guests. Not that these aren't really great guests, but some surprise guests talking about the future of government and how we're going to regulate all of the stuff that we're doing and still be prosperous. So that'll be a cool one. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week. I'm your host, Jim Love. Thanks for listening.